Welcome to another podcast with Beth. And today my guest host is Abby. And I met Abby through one of my clients. And ever since that first initial connection with her, I was like, yes, I need to get her into a podcast, which you'll learn more why. But I wanted her to kind of introduce herself, talk about her background, and why she is in the line of work that she currently is.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. Chat. So I've been in mental health since I was, I think right out of high school. I think I already knew what I wanted to do. My initial career goal was to be an FBI behavioral analyst and profiler. But I didn't end up doing that. Obviously, because I'm here, but I think just growing up, I noticed challenges that people had, whether it be that I had from time to time or my friends, and just noticed some of those things. Mm-hmm. And then being from Wisconsin, I think alcoholism is a big problem, and the normalizing of it. So that kind of piqued my interest some more. And then on top of that, I come from a very proud, patriotic family with a lot of veterans. Mm-hmm. And I vividly remember in the first grade, my first exposure to PTSD. It was my grandfather.
Okay.
And I think I just remember the look of defeat and embarrassment on his face when he realized. So I'll share the story a little bit because I think it's really powerful. My grandfather is just this very... he's just big, manly German guy. He was in World War II in Korea. He was a POW for a period of time. He had 12 kids with my little tiny Belgian grandma. We're talking.
Bless her soul.
We're talking. She had maybe 90 pounds soaking wet on a good day. They had 12 kids, and she's equally amazing. Mm-hmm. In her own way. But I remember in first grade, we're up at their house on the lake, and we heard a huge explosion. It was Christmas time-ish, so some family was up there too. And I just instantly remember my grandfather throwing my grandma under the table, started yelling, giving commands, ordering people around. And I remember one of my uncles going up and saying, "Dad, we're right here."
Oh, wow.
And he immediately realized where he was, what he did, and he went to his room for the rest of the night. He was so embarrassed.
Yeah.
What had happened was 2 doors down, there was a gas leak and the cabin exploded, and everybody is okay and all of those things. But that impactful moment of just this strong person being so vulnerable and defeated in that moment. And I just remember thinking, we're failing people if they can't be open about that. So I think I just started to notice the stigma really early. Mm-hmm. So I think he's probably one of my driving forces for the nonprofit that we started a couple years ago called the Wellness Command Post. And all we do is provide various wellness, mental wellness supports and services to veterans, first responders, which includes EMT, fire, law, dispatchers, corrections, and their support people. We've been doing that for 5 years now, or coming up on 5 years, which has been really wonderful.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. I mean, our vets definitely need that. People in the service need that, being able to have somebody to release those stressors to help to bring them back down from it. I think that's huge. And for them to be vulnerable and talk about it as well. Like, no, this is a safe space. This is a safe place. I'm a safe person for you to release that. Because I think... the society norms do place this big ego on men. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're supposed to be honcho and tough, and they don't have to be. Like, men have emotions, they have feelings, and for you to witness that firsthand, like, that must have been really tough for your grandfather, my cutie.
Absolutely.
We're going to have also more cat guests. Cat guests. So.
Oh, yes, they'll be in and out, I'm sure. And I just think having that piece of it was always seen as vulnerable. And I think we're only starting to break that stigma a little bit for everyone. And that goes male and female. Male, it was you're expected to be strong and assertive and funny and charismatic, and those are the good things, and you can be those things or angry.
Right.
And Brene Brown talks about this. And for women, you're supposed to be mostly neutral. If you are too excited, then you're manic. And if you're upset about something, you must be on your period. And there just has been traditionally no room for error in emotional expression. And it's not that it's error. So it's just being vulnerable. And I think we have to rework that piece of, you can be vulnerable in a healthy way, and finding your green light people, rebounding from your yellow and red light people, because we inevitably will share with people that aren't safe, and we learn and we feel, but just making sure that we feel safe sharing our emotions and our process, and hopefully people don't take it personally.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What do you think makes it so hard for people to release their emotions?
I think shame and embarrassment are big. We live in a society where everything had to be done yesterday and perfect, and there's a lot of comparison. So I think being vulnerable means I'm not good enough. Sharing my feelings means there's something wrong with me, which could not be further from the truth. I think of so many clients that I have that come in and they start crying and they apologize for crying.
Right.
Like, don't apologize for crying. You're expressing emotion.
Yep.
I would be more concerned if you weren't having emotion.
Yeah.
Because that would not be normal. So I think that is definitely a piece, just the stigma and the vulnerability. And I think going further, there's a lot of people that don't know how to receive emotion from somebody. One of my favorite things to do when I do trainings or seminars is when people are like, "Oh, how are you?" I say, "Fucking terrible." And I just sit there and they're like, "Oh, that sucks."
Yeah.
Well, I hope you get that figured out, right? Like instant panic. They didn't have that contingency for me saying anything negative. The expectation when we ask people how they're doing is fine, living the dream, another day, whatever those basics are. But that doesn't allow grace for people to be honest. And I think even when I ask people how they're doing and they give me one of those cookie cutters, like, no, for real, how are you?
Right.
Yeah. You look like you're glowing. So tell me what's great.
I love that. You look like you're glowing.
Right? Or you seem a little bit, off lately. What's on your mind? And really being present, because I think a lot of times we just ask those questions or make comments because that's what is expected, to not be considered rude.
Right.
But
it's an act of kindness.
Yeah, but it's more rude to ask and not really care what the answer is.
Yeah. Yeah. Commonly, I always ask, how's everybody doing? I greet them into the gym, and most of it is this: I'm fine, I'm good. I'm always like flipping it, like, we're alive, we're well, we're moving our bodies, like we're blessed with another day. Like, I'm trying to bring the energy as they come into the gym, because people do come into the gym groggy, a lot of things on their mind, and they're here to release it. And they probably aren't ready to open up and talk to me about it. But when that time comes, I am that gateway for them to open up, and then I can direct them in the path that I think that they would best be suitable for them.
Right.
But I do get that answer a lot, and I just love like that fire that you said, like, I'm terrible.
Yeah.
Because it is like, if somebody says like, yeah, I had a really shitty night, I'm usually like, oh, what's wrong? What's happened? Like, do you want to talk about it? Like, and then you have to just sense the energies as that time comes too, because like sometimes there's a person who's totally fine. He's just in his own. And I remember one gentleman, I was like, yo, you're really off today. Like, you're just quiet. He goes, I'm fine. I'm in the zone. I was like, are you sure you're in the zone? Are you sure something's wrong? Like, you just came in and started lifting. Usually you have like a smirky comment or something.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'm fine. I was like, oh, okay. All right. Well, let me know if you change your mind.
Absolutely. And I think that's just it, is creating and leaving space. Every time when somebody is off or not on their A game doesn't mean that they want to talk about it. And I think that's something so important. I think as just regular day-to-day people, we think that we always have to know the right thing to say.
Right.
And that's couldn't be further from the truth. Mostly it's just having somebody be present and show that they care. It might just be noticing that they're a little off. Like, hey, do you mind if I spot you today? And just being present. And, there's a lot of pieces that go into that, neurobiology wise, but just that companionship, not feeling alone. And then if you in your good positive mood come and invade their space within that 6-foot bubble, your brain being positive is seeping onto their brain, and their brain would have to work 10 times harder to stay in that funk. And it's just going to start coming. And,
Right.
I think there's just so much power to that we don't realize. The comment or the adage of when mom is not happy, nobody's happy. Right, because mom's attitude is infectious. A bad attitude is infectious. A good attitude is infectious. So whoever is the dominant in a setting sets the tone.
I just listened in on like a Reels yesterday, but it was like through Modiversity. And it was about how, picking your friend group, and how if you're picking a friend group who's really negative but likes to go out and party, eats junk food all the time, like you're going to gravitate towards that, and you're going to do that more, and that the outcomes of that isn't going to benefit that individual. Where if you start shifting towards people who are more positive, who like to take care of their health in all ways, shapes, and forms, like to be adventurous, like that energy, like you said, is contagious. And like these people were working out, it's like you're showing up at 5 a.m. to people that you see maybe once a day for 45 minutes, but they care how you are progressing and doing. And it's like you get to learn them as part of your family. They become part of your family. And that's why one thing I love about the gym life, I think it's because everybody just, it comes there and you all become a family in some way, shape, or form, depending on what time you come, so.
Absolutely. And what you're talking about is how our brains love patterns. So when we surround ourselves with certain patterns of people, of food, of attitude, whatever, that is what our brain is subconsciously working to bring more of, because it wants more of that. So what we, and that can lead into manifestation and, vision boards, right? All of these things do the same thing of creating patterns for our brain and that repetition in order to continue to fulfill that, even though we're not necessarily thinking about it all of the time cognizantly.
What would you say, just in the process of learning all of this? Like, I love learning. I'm a constant reader of just like fitness world, mental health, behavioral changes, things like that. And it's more articles than books, because for me to sit down and read a book is really challenging time frame wise, just because of the season of life that I'm in. But like going through college, I remember some of my favorite courses and learning about how the body responds to exercise. So the physiology of how the body responds mentally and physically. So like going through college, what were some of your main courses that like were your prime driver to doing mental health?
Let's see. I think I was always drawn to the way that the brain and the body work naturally, because I think that's something that has always stood out to me, is the difference between, old versions of humans versus modern version of humans, and how our bodies and our minds have adapted. I have a colleague that has been studying the brain for many, many years. And I just said, I am so excited for when we can understand all of the capabilities of the brain. And he said, well, you'll never see it. Our grandchildren will never see it, because our brains are constantly adapting to different stressors. And I think there have been a lot of maybe negative adaptations that our brain and our body have done. So I think I've always been like, I wanted to know what's the standard for how it's supposed to go. And then when we've deviated from that, is it positive, negative, neutral? What that is, because I think that's where a lot of discord happens. within us and just being the truest, healthiest self. And then aside from that, I think I only read because I had to. And then always
you learn as you go.
Yeah. And then I have probably just found more value in like my experiential learning. All through college, I worked in the mental health field. So I worked at a level 12 group home in Southern California and learned a ton about attachment and love and self-love, expectations that we have on ourselves and others, generational trauma, all sorts of things, as well as being a military spouse, being exposed, especially to that in the heat of Iraq and Afghanistan. That was intense in a lot of different ways. And then, just continuing to seek out different experiences. I've learned I'm a yes person, and my husband's probably very irritated by that because it's like, do you have time for that? No, but yes, I will make time for it. And so like the pile just keeps going. But I just find that there's always something to learn from it. And I think the things that have come across my plate, I mean, thinking back, I was like, oh, I want to do mental health, but I don't want to do substance abuse. There's no part of me that wants anything to do with addiction because I felt that it hit too close to home. Well, the world just had different expectations for me or a plan for me. And I've done dual diagnosis for 15 years and I do love it. But the interesting part was, I guess in my program, the parts that I found the most valuable were having to do the self-work. And it's still going. It's not like I'm a finished product at all, but
I feel like in this industry too, you're always doing self-work. You're always going to be growing and learning and doing different experiences because it's always changing.
Yes, absolutely. And we're understanding ourselves. And you mentioned in the season that you're in, well, my 20-year-old season is different than my 30s season, and my with kids is different than my without kids, or being single versus married, or whatever that is. Each season we have a different lens that we're looking through. We have different expectations of our life in that lens. We have different responsibilities in life in that lens. And we have to do that self-work. Even thinking of in my private practice, when I see people with, grief, they might have experienced a significant loss, maybe of a parent in childhood. And they will say, well, I thought I worked through it. I don't know why I'm still feeling sad. And they're in their 30s or 40s. It's because grief is going to hit different throughout your seasons. What you felt that loss of as a child hits different when you're graduating high school and when you're buying your first home and you're getting married. It's different and the same, and it's a journey. Grief is a journey. It's not something we can just
get rid of and check off. Yeah, grief is definitely a tough one, I think, on how people manage grief. And I believe like the more that you can be vocal about it and talk about it, that's only going to help heal it. But I mean, it's never going to just go away. Like you said, there's going to be parts and seasons of your life where like you're going to have that thought of like, oh, I wish this person was here. They would have loved to see this. But those are positive things you can enforce and say to yourself, which hopefully makes it a little bit more comforting to you, But what do you have to say over there,
Andy?
So with your experiences, do you have like some experiences that are just like speaking out loud that always like you can reflect on? I mean, it's definitely a journey in your practice. And you mentioned being in a family home, being in California, like that must have been an experience of all the things that you've seen, witnessed, partook in the healing process. And like, it's kind of scary.
I don't know that I've ever been scared, thankfully, because I've definitely, between doing crisis work and lots of de-escalation, individuals that are, really at the lowest spot in their life. I think back to just a lot of the cultural pieces that I learned working in like a youth home Especially because I was the minority, being
Right.
this little white girl. I mean, I was in my early 20s. So really not that much older than them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, most of them came from gang related families, didn't have a whole lot. And I just remember just trying to find the commonality in
Right.
everything. And I think our world, um, just by nature, we compare and we contrast and we inadvertently divide.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably the biggest piece that stands out to me is I feel like I can connect with anybody on something because we just need to find it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is our common ground?
Right.
Starting out as a young psychotherapist, a lot of older adults would be like, "Well, what do you know about life? How can you help me?" Have not lived your life, and I may
Right.
not have had the same experiences as you. So that's where you're the expert, and I get to just be the guide
Right.
and reflect some of that and support you through that. And you know, 99% of the time we can figure it out. I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and I'm
Right.
thankful for that.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be everybody's cup of tea. That sounds overwhelming and very
Mm-hmm.
busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that, I mean, everything from chronic mental illness, between schizophrenia and,
Mm-hmm.
personality disorders where they're just very hopeless and struggle to be stable to lots of PTSD,
Mm.
needing to find somebody, get them safe.
Right.
Probably one of the things that stands out, especially in my younger years, would be one of the boys at the group home. So it was 12 houses, I think 10 or 12 houses, and then a school. And he always had his headphones in, and back in the day of like Discman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's what I'm envisioning is like a big CD pack.
yeah, I mean, we've got, he's just carrying it around and he's got his headphones in. And I just remember being like, okay. But then, when you stand next to somebody, usually you can hear.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he's not listening. Like, I don't ever hear anything. So I wonder if it's just really low. And then he ended up being moved to my house. And one night I was just like, I just wonder what he's listening to. And so like I opened it and there wasn't a CD in it.
Mm.
So I was like, that's strange. So I really thought about it and reflected. And I had kind of asked him, what have you been listening to? And he, would just tell me something. And I didn't push it. But what it ended up being once I connected with him more was he had internal stimuli. He was hearing voices in his head. And when he would
Oh,
respond to them, it was more normal looking for him to be perceived as singing or rapping to music than to be talking to himself.
wow.
Um, and nobody else had noticed or asked or anything. So we were able to start treating that in a different way to help him feel a little bit more balanced.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a lot of shame
Yeah.
in that.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that for him was cultural. I'm going to be seen as crazy.
Right.
My family's going to think that I'm crazy and I can't come home.
Mm-hmm. And that's hard. It's like the shame feeling, like to have that emotion. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm trying to reflect like on my life. If I've felt shame, I don't know if I felt shame. Maybe I've had that guilty feeling.
Yep.
So that to overcome something like that has got to be hard, and to be like to accept yourself for what you are. Like that's a step-by-step process. It's figuring out the pathways and how to do it and letting them know like there's nothing wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
We're taking the steps to make you feel the best version of yourself, and manage what is happening in those terms.
Right. And so just to kind of add definition to that,
Yeah.
shame is I am bad, guilt is I did something bad.
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely, we should all feel guilt. My 16-year-old daughter says I'm being mean if I'm allowing her to feel guilt,
Yeah.
but guilt is what stops us from doing it again.
Mm-hmm.
Guilt is what helps keep us between the ditches, right?
Yeah.
But that shame piece of I am bad, that's a terrifying spot for somebody to be in for too long.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay if it's, call it a hot thought or an automatic thought that just pops into your head. I think everybody has negative hot thoughts from time to time, but they're fleeting, and that's okay. It's when they stay and they start to have roots
Mm-hmm.
in your brain and your body that is really the dangerous spot, because it can go south so quickly. And if you don't have a good support system, you don't have those healthy coping skills. Or I just think of how many, particularly older veterans, that are so isolated because they don't want to deal with people. Most of the people that they know have maybe passed away, whatever that is. They don't have somebody to even notice that they're struggling.
Right. Would you, I'm trying to figure out the right way to say this. Because I have clients, I have a current client who is battling his self-worth, and he has a lot of negative things to say about it. Like he messed up, it was all his fault. And would you say that kind of stems from shame, or those thoughts can stem from other things? Or
I think that is like such the slippery slope right there, where it can definitely be in shame. Usually there's something rooted there. They've heard that before, right? Whether that be, I think I have a client right now actually who we talk about, actually I have several now that I'm thinking about it, because it is so common. Again, being from Wisconsin and having most people having been exposed to alcoholism in their family, there's 10 common characteristics of an adult child of an alcoholic. And some of those include perfectionism, being either all in or all out. It's because then it's either I've succeeded or I've failed. Always trying to please and fix things for others. And when we do that, we feel like we have let somebody down. I was just talking to somebody who we worked through their childhood pressure and guilt of feeling like they should have saved their parent from alcoholism as a young child, and that they were so worried that they missed out on some things because they needed to be home to feel like they were helping and keeping their parents safe. That's not fair.
Right.
But there was, there's guilt there. Thankfully, it didn't go to shame. But in that, had the parent had an accident or not survived, there would probably be shame.
Right.
So it can just go so quickly. Speaking of, I think you alluded that your client is male. Men probably have some of the highest rates of shame. And partially it's because it's not talked about.
Right.
I don't think men sit around and talk about their feelings or their thoughts or.
Right. That's not the first thing on their agenda when they get together with guys.
No, not.
And I hate it sometimes because like my husband goes out with his friends. I was like, well, what'd you guys talk about? Like, give me the scoop. There's no scoop. Like, why is there no scoop? And it's just like, I'm not being nosy by any means. I'm interested in what's happening, what's going on. And I leave it at that.
Well, yeah, I think my husband went somewhere with friends and he was like, oh, so-and-so's getting married. I was like, oh, that's so exciting. When? I don't know.
It's like, you got to give me the details.
Oh, is it? Okay, that sounds exciting. Yeah, I don't know. They just said it. I was like, there's nothing else to that? Nothing? Like no other conversation? Okay. But it goes back to that like masculine expectation of that leader. And I'll reference Brene Brown again. She talks about somebody who came to one of her book signings that was a guy and had her sign the books, and he questioned, why do you not study men? And she, because I'm like, oh, I don't know. And like, well, the women behind me that I just had you sign this book for would rather see me die on my white horse than fall off.
Really?
But that's the expectation.
Yeah.
We want strong leaders. Society views men still very much as you have to be that strong, assertive leader and be successful. If not, you have failed, and we would rather see you die in battle
Wow.
than give up.
Yeah.
And that is so not fair. Women experience it, I think, in a lot of ways, the same but different.
Right.
But I think men just don't talk about it. And I don't think that they check in on their buddies enough. And I don't think that they normalize it enough.
I like that you said peeling back and finding like that root cause. And that can be with nutrition, but applying it to mental health, I think, is huge because you do need to peel back some of these layers and be vulnerable to really dig down and find the root to begin the healing process. And I think a lot of people just want to mask.
Oh, for sure. We want the quick fix.
Right. And I mean, that's with many things in life, but if we can start finding that root, the root cause of it, it's just going to open up a lot more for you to help resolve and heal and become vulnerable with other people with similarities to that.
Yeah. Well, being in fitness, I mean, we think of the Adverse Childhood Experiences questionnaire, the ACEs. It was created by Kaiser Permanente, an insurance company. And it's because they kept finding that people were going through weight loss treatment over and over and over again. And they're like, why is this not successful? Why do we keep paying for it? We don't want to. So they started studying it. And it's because they were only providing the nutrition and the physical health piece of it. So those were the symptoms of the underlying trauma and mental concerns fueling the self-image, the poor coping skills, the depression, the isolation, all of those things. So then that's how we have the ACEs questionnaire.
Wow. I didn't know that. I might have to go and study that. Or read about it. That's actually really interesting on how it came about.
Yeah.
And that's something we didn't really learn about in kinesiology.
Right.
Was that mental health side of things. That's really neat. From I think all of the mental health issues that have arose and become more known and people are becoming more vocal about it. How would you say that's navigating in the mental health industry? Are people trying to seek more treatment, or are people going to the pharmaceutical side of things, trying to just mask and move forward? How would you say that's shifted?
I think for a long time it was more medication based. I think, we could probably all think of most of our friends from school that got put on Ritalin because it was considered that easy fix.
I think people were proud. When I was going through college, it would be like, oh yeah, I'm on Ritalin. Yeah. They would say that in college, and it's like, oh wow, you get super focused. And they would take it during studying or take it during exams. Yeah. It's like, holy crap. But the more that you learn about it, it's like, was it necessary?
Well,
or was it just a substance for them?
Absolutely. And thinking of ADHD, we do know that there's definitely a brain chemistry component there, that medication is usually part of it. But I think it doesn't need to be the only part, nor should it always be the part, because there's a lot of people that can. So I think as a culture at whole, I think mental health culture is interesting because we have groups of people that are still very wanting to be labeled. I want to know what I have. I want you to give me the treatment. I want you to give me the drug, and I'm going to heal from that. Or even feeling like they need a label of a diagnosis. And I think that's a hard spot for me because I don't like labeling or generalizing. I treat symptoms, not diagnoses. And I think that's there's a big difference there. Because I think if you and I sat here and read the DSM-5, we could probably go through and be like, oh, I've got a touch of that. Oh, that could be me. Some days that's me. And yes, we're imperfect humans. So we always will have some level of anxiety, some level of sadness, some level of want things a particular way, some level of, trauma, because life happens.
Right.
but that does not mean that it impedes on the way that we function in life. And I think we have to focus on something is clinical if we struggle to manage work, home, relationships, school, finances, multiple areas of our life. Yeah, then let's seek some higher, more intense. But I think a lot of it, which I think is becoming more trendy or accepted, is the overall wellness piece of it, of that idea of preventative. How can I, every day, how can I improve 1%? And is that by changing my diet, going to bed 30 minutes earlier, going for a walk at lunch instead of sitting on TikTok?
Right.
What does that look like? And I think I'm really excited about the idea of a lot more Eastern concepts coming to the Western world and just integrating that a little bit more. And I think that's a big shift that I'm starting to see, which I think is really hopeful.
That's really neat. Have you, do you work with farmers, with you having the stables here in the ranch? Like, do you, and the only reason why I'm asking this is because I have a girlfriend who is a farm owner and she's phenomenal at it. And we were talking about this and she actually made the comment about how farmers are the leading percentage of possible depression, suicidal, because, and like when she mentioned that to me, I was like, oh my God, like I could see, because the farm life is hard life. Farm life is tough. I mean, and it's hard to find freedom for you to do what you want to do because you always have to resort back to the cows and see and like manage the herd and the health. And there's so much that applies to that. So when she said that to me, I was like, oh my God. So I was like, I got to ask Abby.
I do. And actually, my practice is one of the ones that partner. The state of Wisconsin actually has a farm mental health grant. And any farmer in the state of Wisconsin can reach out and get free sessions that are covered and paid for by the state of Wisconsin. And they have a list of vetted providers that understand farm life.
Okay.
So when you go, you're not going to sit in some, hopefully not some, stuffy office where you don't feel like you can connect with a therapist or they have to ask a bunch of questions and understand. They will just get it and connect. And I think you can request more, ask for more, than you use your insurance or whatever, but they at least cover 3, I believe. So we're listed on there.
Oh, that's exciting.
Which is
all the farmers tuning in.
Yes, for sure. And I think it's nice because we can just meet you where you're at and it's non-threatening, which is the same as like the Wellness Command Post is great because all of our providers are vetted. They understand law enforcement and military culture. You don't have to explain the acronyms. They understand the shifts. They understand the nervous system change that happens when you're constantly going from an elevated state to an unelevated state and what that does to your adrenal system and how your brain functions. And I mean, even down to we do have a mental health nurse practitioner on our team that the nice part is most times if you go to your general doctor, they're going to put you on the most commonly used or their preferred prescription. The nice thing is that she understands how your nervous system and your adrenal system and your neurobiology has changed from this persistent stress and adrenaline pumps and drops, that she can kind of weed out the ones that aren't going to work. Whereas, a general, you might have to trial and error a little bit more, which is frustrating when you just want to feel better.
Feel the normal. But what's normal for you is different normal for me too.
Absolutely. And sometimes we have to grieve what our normal used to be. I think a couple years ago, I got in a really bad car accident and I really struggled after that TBI of giving myself grace. And I know that this is just a personal piece for me. It's not necessarily an extreme case. There's many people that are grieving a different version of themselves. But even thinking about people who go through a divorce, you are grieving the person that you used to be. your college self, you might have to grieve. And that normal was not normal. I mean, think of aging, right?
Yeah, yeah.
If somebody's like, hey, do you want to go out? The movie starts at 9:30. No.
Right. Yeah, no, thank you.
I don't.
I'm usually in bed. Don't text me past 10. I should say don't text me past like 8, 8:30 because I will not respond. If I do, it's going to be at 11 after I wake up in the middle of the night in my toddler's bed and go to my adult bed. Because my husband attempts to wake me up, but I just lay there as from what he told me.
Yeah.
But that's a really good like way to concept and to think of that. Like, because I battled hard with mom guilt with after I had my middle and then coming into my third, it was very close. So I had extreme guilt of I can do it myself. I don't need to ask for help. I didn't get to spend enough time with my middle as much as I did with my first, but I did in a whole different way. Now, after I've like processed it and actually acknowledged it, and when you go in for your 6-week checkups, they go through all of that stuff with you, but I just kind of kept shoving it off. Like I'm fine. This is normal. My hormones are imbalanced. I'm nursing. And then finally it was just like a clicker where one day I was like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Like, and why am I putting so much stress on me to do this alone where I have a crew of people like my family to support me and help me when I need it. And I should be stressing these feelings to my husband versus getting angry with him for no reason. So, and a lot of that came from, I think, me actually figuring it out was self-reflection, listening to podcasts about self-worth. And that's, I always carry this journal in my backpack because it's just like you said, look through the lens, and we all have a different lens in our season. And if you're only looking in those goggles, you're missing out on everything else that's around you. And it just was, when I heard that for the first time, I was like, oh my God, I can apply that to some of my training and to some of my clients when they open up to me and talk to me about that. And then, I can direct them in the avenues that I think would best be suitable for them, but just even encouraging them to self-reflect and jot down their feelings, express their feelings with the person who's closest to them so that person can help understand. Because it's also very difficult for your partner. Like, yes, you're battling something, but your partner is also trying to be strong in the process for your healing. But they're also maybe in the corner breaking down like, I don't know what more I can do type feeling. So it's definitely like, if you're open with your partner or your loved one, like I feel like that's huge.
Well, I think it goes back to the idea of vulnerability, right? There's a lot of fear in being vulnerable, and we have to, as a society and as a culture, reshape that and reframe that. Being vulnerable is brave. Saying I don't got it is brave because now I can put it out there and I can get the support. I can be validated of, well, you don't have to be good at everything, right? There's all these pieces, but really we are failing ourselves and everyone else if we continue to truck along struggling, thinking that we that we do have it, and we don't. Like, that's the weakness.
Yeah, that's definitely hard. How would you say social media has affected like the shift of society, mental health in general?
It's much easier to compare ourselves because we see so many people at the touch. I mean, it's such a loaded question because there's so many ways, right?
There's a lot with social media.
Think of how it has changed the dating world. Now somebody who is single can just flip through and shop for a date.
I never looked at it that way.
Just like I'm flipping through picking which shirt I want off of a website, I can shop for a partner and try it on. And if I don't like it, I don't put more energy into it. I just immediately dismiss it. Divorce rates are up because we put less effort and work into it. There's less of and not saying that every divorce is bad, by any means. But there's less focus on
the marriage itself,
healing, and instead like, well, if I'm not happy here, I can go find happiness somewhere else. And then I can, all of these pieces. And I think that comes back to self-love. If we feel secure enough in ourselves and secure enough in sharing our thoughts and feelings and surround ourselves with people that are like-minded and can manage that, part of that is like, one, we can't expect our closest friends to always be at the top of their game, right? There might be days that I call you and I'm like, man, I just crappiest day. I'm really in it. And you're like, that really sucks. Can I call you back later?
Right.
And of course I would say yes, but then I might hang up being like, what the heck?
Right.
Like, Beth, I called you because you're my person today and you just like totally dropped the ball, right? And I can be really unrealistic in my expectation. But I think a lot of times we're so consumed in our, my thought would be, and I believe that you would do this, is you would call me back later or even the next day and just be like, hey, I am sorry you called and I was in the middle of all the things with the kids and I just want to make sure I could really attend to what you were saying. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah.
That means a million times more than somebody who just blanketly tries and doesn't own up to when we can't be there for each other. And that's human. How many people expect their partner to be able to be everything for them? That's not realistic.
Right.
You still need friends. You still need, your own hobbies and things. But I also think that we've gotten away from being truly intimately connected to the people that are physically closest to us. I think of how many kids I talk to, or even adults, that will share their deepest, darkest secrets with somebody that they have never met on the internet, that maybe they don't even know what they really actually look like or their real name, but to talk to their best friend about what they're really thinking and feeling is not going to happen.
Yeah, the whole electronics in our household is very limited, and just because of, you don't know what's out there, and my kids are young, they don't need to have that, and I do dread that it is added into the school curriculum, like they use tablet time and stuff. It's like, why can't they teach them to do like board games, Trouble, checkers, Connect Four? Like, start with that. Like, teach the kids how to be friends and to communicate to one another. Like sports, like, I think you have to have the communication skills and the teamwork, and it's almost kind of being pulled away because of the phones and the tablets and the computer software. And I get it. Like, it's Earth, it's science. It's always going to be changing. It's always going to be growing. But I just get, I don't know. It's kind of like a balance beam. Like, it's like you're in the middle, because you're not against it. You're definitely not for it 100%. But I don't want to just throw my kid on a tablet for me to go do something. I'm going to say, go color a picture, go do a crossword puzzle. Like, I am that parent, and my daughter does give me a really hard time about it. But and I have to hide her electronics, and it's just a tablet, like a Kindle. And we got her like a little phone for an Archer bowl game. And I said, I will only give you your phone if you go play her bowl game. And she'll play her bowl game for like 5 minutes. And then next thing you know, I find her on YouTube. So it's like, I think, and I don't want to be too hard, because then she's going to rebel against it too. So it's like, you got to kind of be on the balance beam for that.
It is hard. I mean, technology is definitely seeming to be the way of the future. So if we don't teach our kids how to use technology safely and correctly at a young age, they're going to be behind the curve. I mean, my mom talks about all the time how if she needs to figure out how to do something on her phone, she asks my kids. And that's just, it is the way it is. I think of some kids who have either been homeschooled or had alternative learning that didn't have the access to technology. They're definitely at a disadvantage when they're trying to get a job, because they don't understand Word and they don't have a fast typing speed and they can't produce PowerPoints, and, with more education being online in college, with the flexibility of that, which again, pros and cons. I love that I can take a class by some professor around the world and that I would never have had access to before. However, a lot of times it can lose a lot of the connection, a lot of the conversation that's so important, the checks and balances, because, as a professor, I think I have some students that are great at academic bookwork that I don't know how it's going to shine, in the actual practice of it, and then vice versa. So I do think that it's hard, and, our education system could do better. Yeah. In a dream world, we would have something closer to Finland, or some of the European countries with, shorter days, or I think of my kids in middle school and high school. They go to school for 8 hours. They have an hour or two of homework. If they have sports, if they have a job, us trying to sit down and have dinner as a family, trying to be outside before it gets dark.
Yeah.
There's just not enough hours in the day to have that balance. What are we teaching our kids as far as the expectations of life? We're teaching them that an 8-hour day isn't enough. You still have to take your work home.
And the constant saying is not enough time in the day.
Yeah, all those things.
I think too, a big thing like that I struggle with social media is that so many people portray more positive things. It's not always portrayed vulnerability.
Yeah.
Like, oh crap, I sucked at dinner tonight and we're just having pizza, frozen pizza, because that's normal. And I was just thinking for myself, like Wednesday I made a post about like a dinner that I made with all my leftovers. And then last night was frozen pizza and cheese and sausage and crackers. So it's just finding a balance, but I had a really good lunch. So I was like, all right, I just need cause some days it's just, you just want a snack. So and then like self-imagery and, you're going to compare yourself to the people on social media who you want to look like, but genetically you might not be able to, because of how your body is bone proportion wise, or how your fat sits in your body. Is it more hips or waistline? So it's like people don't really look into all of those different attributes and standpoints when it comes to fitness or body dysmorphia. I think too is a big one. And I think that makes me, I just hit my mic. I think that makes me fearful because I battled with that. And I don't want my daughter to battle with that. And I think social media can increase that. Like battling with anorexia and body dysmorphia at a very young age. But I think my root was because of my parents getting in the divorce. That was the only control I had.
Sure.
And it allowed me to receive additional attention from my parents.
Yeah.
So like a lot of that came from, I found my root, and I'm hoping like if somebody is battling something like that, like start now with your healing process. Don't wait until you're 3 years deep and you have to go through a therapeutic like process of slowly adding food back in. And because that process, it can be a journey in itself.
And it has so many bumps in the road. I would say that eating disorder treatment is probably one of the most complex, even beyond trauma. There's so many layers and it's so hard. And I think it goes back to the view of our healthcare system is reactive. We don't help you until you're sick.
Right.
We don't cover this until it's at this point. Have you tried, all of these other things? Like, we really need to be more preventative in nature of everything. I mean, there's always little tweaks that we can be doing. I think of every client that I see, typically I start helping them create a wellness plan from day one. And then of course my students and my team's always like, well, why would you do that? And it's like, okay, well, it's the exact same thing as a safety plan, right? Somebody is at the depths of whatever, and we have to coach them through what skills to use. And if they can't use them successfully, who to call. Why are we waiting until they're in crisis brain? That makes no sense. Again, our body and our brain like patterns. So why wouldn't we start to identify the gaps in this plan beforehand? So do you not have a strong support system? Let's start building you one. Let's get you connected. Do you not have coping skills that you like? Do you not know where you feel safe in the world? Let's figure that out from day one, because then when life happens, because it inevitably does, oh, great, we've been building this for months. Now let's use it. Or you've already been using it and it's not quite working. Let's amp it up. Way easier than being in crisis emotional brain. When I'm super emotional, of course, I'm not thinking about like I'm turning the doorknob the wrong way
right.
or however many times I've gone to like storm out a door and it's push and not pull,
right? Yep,
Like something so silly, because when we get so emotional, our rationality just plummets and it's just not successful. So I just think of all these things that we can be doing, whether it be increasing our physical health, replacing one ingredient a day or a week, adding one meal of fish a week, or, you know, taking out one fast food, packing one lunch a week.
Yep.
Just little wins.
Yep. Little wins. Do you think like nutrition today plays a big role in?
Huge.
Because that's definitely become a big topic just recent within the past few months. And, you know, I definitely agree with that. But I just because of the food process and how food is created now has changed. Correct. Ingredients has created. I just talked to a gentleman who actually used to work in the food industry, and I can't remember which food industry. I can't remember if it was I think it was Oscar Mayer. And he said, when I first initially started, it was like the best hot dog there was. And then he's young, he's like in his 40s, and he's like, and I retired because like when I left, he's like, when I left, they threw just a bunch of shit in there. I'm like, oh my God. Like, imagine. And I mentioned to him, I was like, I would love to learn more about this, because it's just so intriguing to me to learn about that. And like, same with the cereals concept, and same with granola bars and junk. And then I look at all these young kids who are obese and heavy. It all starts in their home, just like everything else, mental health, digestive health, all that. Physical health, it all starts in home with the parent. But if the parent is uneducated, the child is going to be uneducated.
Or it doesn't have access.
Or doesn't have access,
is expensive.
It is.
Which is crazy. I just think of what it would be like if every kid in school started a salad garden and got to take it home. Something that no matter really cool. Where you live, whether it's in an apartment or a house or a trailer, wherever it is, you can stick it, you know, in a sunny place to continue growing lettuce, cherry tomatoes, you know, maybe some little peppers, just little things. There's so much in, like you said, the production of food that we don't realize that we're creating, you know, opportunity for it to be easier and quicker. But we're removing a lot of the things that our body needs. Most Americans are vastly deficient in magnesium. Well, that makes sense why we're moodier, why we have more sleep problems, and we have more weight problems, because then that's related to our cortisol levels. And when we have a thicker middle, typically cortisol related, right? All of these things that just are getting in the way. Most things that we need, the actual nutrients and minerals, end up being processed out.
Yes. I don't know if you notice this at all, but sometimes I do get sometimes frustrated just on the whole process, because it's overwhelming. And I feel like in the schools, in the health class, and also in science class, this should be like a huge topic. Talking about, like in health class, you learn about like how the body, you learn about men and women, but it's just do like a quick subject on when you eat something, how it can digest, what it can do. And over time, if you're eating Burger King for 5 weeks straight, versus Subway. And I mean, Subway is going to be just equally amount of calories as a Burger King. But look at the nutrients that you might be getting from Subway if you put it in a wrap, not on a roll, versus the burger and cheese and pickle and pair it with the Diet Coke. So it's like, I think people really do well when you compare something. If you set it up right next to each other and be like, what's better, this or this? Why is this better over this? Well, this isn't bad if you have it once a month. This is going to be bad if you have it weekly.
Correct.
Like, I use my mom as an example with this because she used to eat carrots nonstop. And this was like back when I was in high school. And it was literally, she would eat a bag of baby cut carrots in a day over a week's time. And her skin started turning orange.
Oh my God.
And like, it's kind of a joke now, but it's like, oh my God, you're getting too much keratin. Like, your skin actually can turn orange. And so I use my mom as an example as that, because like, people are like, oh, carrots are good, I'm just going to snack on this. Well, if you eat too much of something that's going to be good for you, it can have a reverse effect on you. So it's just interesting. And I wish, and like, when you meet with a general practitioner, this should be something that they should probably go over with their client for the first time. If you're meeting a client for the first time, say, all right, let's just do a little study, probably like what you do. Like, you figure out the symptoms and where to begin with your client. And I feel like it's getting lost in real medicine. And that's why a lot of people are shifting over to the functional medicine side of things.
Yes. And the hard part is finding a functional or integrative medicine doctor that
isn't going to push supplements on you.
Either, that or is covered by your insurance.
Yes.
That you don't, because again, that access, just like not every family can afford healthy food. Not every family can afford to pay out of pocket for good health care or reasonable health care. And that is unfortunate. I think it's been circulating on the internet, but there's a picture of 3 breads, all put in Ziploc bags, and it says the brands and where they're from. And one of them doesn't mold, and that's one that's store-bought. So if it didn't mold, what is in it that you're putting in your body that is stopping it from molding? When we think of like women and our young girls, the amount of hormones that are added to food are wreaking havoc on our bodies, creating hair loss issues, autoimmune deficiencies, mood, irregular menstrual periods, right? All of these things, and of course are altering men also in the same, because there's still hormones there, but this is not helping us at all. And then we wonder why we're seeing increases in cancer and infertility, and even down to some of the supplements that they require or suggest every woman to take when pregnant. Statistically, it's not shown that every woman is deficient in those during pregnancy. So why is everybody asked to do that?
Right.
Because again, just because it's good for you doesn't mean that taking more is good for you.
Right. So what would be some steps? We're going to kind of close her up here. I don't know how long we're at. What would be some steps that you would suggest to somebody who is battling either self-worth, depression, maybe behavioral issues, food disorder, ADD, anything like along those lines? What would be like a first initial step that you would suggest, like almost maybe like a simple skeleton? What would you?
I would say
a generic version, we'll say.
Sure. I would say one, if you feel comfortable journal. And don't, I think sometimes we go like gung ho on the things and we're like, I'm going to journal every day or whatever. Like, no, just like a couple times a week, and maybe go back and read your journal entries on those off days and reflect. And maybe that helps to guide you, because I think we get a lot of awareness from that still intentional time with ourselves. That's probably one of the biggest things. And my husband has taught me that over the course of our relationship. He loves to be alone. And I historically have not. I like to be busy. I like to be engaged. But now I'm starting to realize just that power and comfort in stillness and being alone. And as much as, as much as I can handle,
right.
I do. And everybody's threshold is different. So I think journaling is a really good one, especially if you are not sure that you want to share your thoughts and feelings with somebody else.
Yep.
So it's a safe place to start in that self-reflection. Otherwise, I think find that safe person. Take that risk. And it may not be your best friend or your family member. It might be your trainer at the gym. It might be, somebody that you work with that you've really connected with. It could be a neighbor. It could be a lot of different things. Bartender, hairdresser. I think they're usually
they're on the top 10, I'm sure.
Yeah, all of those things, but just that space and on that, if you are any provider of any service, something that is so important to educate yourself on is the importance of asking the hard questions and being okay with the answer. I know we're wrapping up, but the Zero Suicide University about 10 years ago did a study, and over 70% of individuals who completed suicide had connected with a service provider within 30 days before their passing. The number one determinator of or the commonality between those providers was that they did not ask if they had any negative thoughts about themselves or safety risk.
Wow.
So you don't ask, you don't provide the opportunity. Yeah. Because if I'm that low, I'm already feeling really bad about myself. I certainly don't want to look at the look on your face when I say I've been having bad thoughts about myself.
Right.
Because what if you're not going to be like, Abby, I care about you so much. Thank you so much for telling me. I want to support you through this. What if you say, that's stupid? Why would you think that?
Right.
But if you're comfortable saying, hey, Abby, where's your headspace been lately? Or, if you're a massage therapist or a dentist or whatever, hey, just a quick question I'm going to ask you every single time, because I would rather ask you every time than, to find out that something bad happened. Just do it. And then again, holding that space and just be like, that's hard, but it's okay.
Yeah. Oh, it gives me the chills just thinking about that, because you never know where somebody's at unless you ask, and you have to be willing to open up the door if you truly want to be that person for them. I am going to put all of Abby's information in the description below. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to her or myself, and we will certainly guide you in the right path as needed. But otherwise, I hope you are well on this day, tuning in. Continue to stay tuned for other podcasts. And I'm reading her signs in the background, and just one is standing out, like, remember, maybe swearing will help. Different is beautiful. And you are in the process of being the best version of yourself. And that is through self-reflection, journaling, and finding your support team. So you guys all have a wonderful day, and thank you for tuning in.